There's many of you that arrive here today, you're just not in the groove. Things aren't going great. Maybe you're in a down cycle in your life. Maybe there's some letdowns and some hurts.
A lot of setbacks, a lot of defeats. You've experienced a lot of disappointment. Maybe you've already given up.
Little anxiety, little fear, maybe all the way to some depression. And I just want to be that person who reminds you that you can do something special and that you're going to, and that you have everything you need within you right now to make your life great, and you can turn it around at any time you decide to.
And maybe you just need a little fire, a little encouragement to get back in the game again. I want you to be able to say something to yourself that will enable you to maintain a level of integrity with yourself. Even when you face tremendous setbacks, it will be a benchmark to keep you in the game, to keep you moving forward and experimenting and readjusting your strategy, looking for ways to win. What is that something that will enable us to act on our dream? What's one of those keys? Here's what I want you to repeat after me, please, with power and conviction. Say, it's possible. It's possible. Because what does that do? See, it begins to change your belief system. See, the way in which we operate, ladies and gentlemen, it's a manifestation of what we believe, what's possible for us. Whatever you've done up to this point, all that it really is a duplication, it's a reproduction of what you believe subconsciously that you deserve and what's possible for your life.
It's hard to accept that because it seems coincidental, that the wrong person entered our life, or there was a business setback, or our company went out of business, or whatever it might be, and it seems coincidental. But you really truly are getting out of your life what you believe you're worth, and you're allowing it to happen. And I'm going to challenge you today to stop that. Stop allowing it and know that you deserve better. See, the truth is, ego is always false. That raises its head when we're insecure, when we're fearful. If you meet people that you think are egomaniacs, that are constantly bragging about themselves, these are the most insecure people that you know. And they're usually the least happy. It's actually the people that are down on themselves that actually have their ego materialize and show up more often than they think. And you think, wow, how could someone with low self-esteem have a big ego? Well, trust me, they do. The people in my life that are the most self-confident typically don't have big egos. My ego will step forward often in my life, and it usually steps forward when I'm the most scared. It could be when I'm achieving. I'm starting to be pretty full of myself, right? What's really happening in your mind is you're afraid you're going to fall down. You're afraid you're going to lose something. You're afraid there's going to be a setback. So often our friends where we see their ego is when they're doing good. You guys that have a friend, he's really winning, he's making a lot of money, he's just not the same. He's got a big ego all of a sudden. That money he's making, that car he's driving now, he's so afraid he's going to lose it. He so believes his results have exceeded who he really is that ego shows up because he's afraid. When you see ego, know it usually means fear. So we've got to be able to see our ego when it rears its head, be aware of it, and it loses its power over us. We can go back to being our real selves. You can't love yourself if you're not being yourself. But remember this, when ego shows up, we're not ourselves. We're not connected to God. When you can let go of your ego, you can let your real confidence in. When you let go of your ego, you can go really become who you were born to be. And so you may be losing right now because of your ego, because you're not feeling good about yourself. Here are some of the signs that your ego is taking over in your life. Number one, defensiveness. Defensiveness. You ever meet somebody who's very defensive, very reactive about whatever their situation is or whatever you're asking them about? Their ego is rearing its head. So in yourself and in other people, do you see any defensiveness patterns for you? This is an ego issue. Number two thing that's ego issue is always trying to be right or prove what you're saying to be true in excess. The need to always win in a disagreement. This is an ego issue that somehow if you concede to somebody that they've made a great point and maybe you need to make an adjustment or a change, that somehow you're weak. So believe it or not, that's an ego move based out of the insecurities you have. You don't always have to win every disagreement. It's okay to say, I'm sorry. Admitting you're sorry, admitting you're wrong, being open to criticism and changing is a sign of confidence and strength. Ego is when we're weak and insecure and we have to win. We have to prove what we're saying is true. We have to prove we're right. So I know many of you right now, that's so-and-so at work. That's my spouse. That's my girlfriend. That's my boyfriend. That's my dad. That's my mom. And that's great that you see it in other people. But is it you? It's easy to see these egos in other people. But the real winners in life, the real achievers are so self-aware they see these things in themselves. Number 3, pride and boasting, constantly bragging about themselves, being very prideful in their behavior. The Bible talks often about, the maladies of having pride in our life. But if you're bragging, if you're prideful all the time, this is someone with a big ego. That's one of the more obvious ones. We go, I know that. The next one's the not so obvious one, revenge. Do you seek revenge against people? Do you know people who are constantly getting back at somebody? Revenge is ego every single time. Next, possessiveness. And our desire to control people, control situations, to possess people almost is an ego issue. Someone's trying to be possessive of you. Your personal relationships, know this is an ego out of control happening, and they better get that ego in check, or it's going to make your life miserable being in a relationship with them. Be honest. Does this fit you or someone you love or no? Talking poorly or gossiping about other people, number one sign of insecurity. Insecurity and lack of confidence is actually ego, and it is. And so people who gossip, who talk about others, try to go an entire day of your life without talking about another person in a negative way. Just try to not talk about another person to other people for an entire day. And it'll begin to reveal to you how often maybe even you do it. I have moments of weakness, especially when I'm with other people who sort of do that. I start to behave more like them, and maybe you do too. When you're around gossipers, do you gossip or do you stay above it? Do you see this in you? Be honest. Next is what I call the gym weirdos. You ever been at the gym and you see that woman or that guy constantly flexing in the mirror? Or maybe you have a friend who's constantly looking in the mirror, constantly checking their phone, constantly posting only filtered pictures on social media, right? Constantly obsessed with what they're looking at themselves. These are out of control ego people. Bullying. Bullying is an ego issue. Only insecure and weak people bully people. You may have a boss that's a bully. You may have a leader that's a bully, that their only way to get you to move and perform is bullying. You'll get far more out of your life and other people by pulling them with you than by pushing them. Now let's go through some of the less obvious ego issues that you may be suffering from. Number 1, seeking outside approval and reward. The addiction to other people's approval is an ego issue on your part. You have an out of control ego if you're seeking the approval of other people. You can't love yourself if you're not being yourself, and you can't be yourself if you don't believe in yourself. People who are afraid of being lonely usually have an ego issue. They're afraid to be alone. They don't like to be in their own company. You ask yourself, are you comfortable in your own presence, in your own company? Again, that'll indicate to you whether you love yourself. Another ego issue is that you only hang around people who agree with you. You only hang around people who believe exactly politically what you believe, exactly what you believe religiously. A rich life, a confident person is willing to associate with people who have different opinions and express them. An unconfident person can only surround themselves with people who think exactly like them. It's a formula for no growth. There's no one to challenge you. There's no one to stretch you. There's no one to make you think differently. And maybe it reinforces your strength. Maybe they persuade you. Next level is really subtle, is you're offended by criticism. If you're offended by people's criticism, you really have an ego issue. Are you stuck in the past? Are you constantly telling old stories from your past? Nobody wants to hear about your past. No one wants to know where you played quarterback or what you got in college, when you were once on TV. No one wants to know about the past or what you once did anywhere in your life. They want to know where you're going and what you're doing. If you're constantly reciting the past, it means you're not living in the present, and it's a formula for not winning. The next thing is insecurity and self-doubt. That's an obvious one, but believe it or not, people who are insecure and have self-doubt have an out-of-control ego. Ego is false self, so they lead with the false self because they're so insecure and they've got so much self-doubt. Constantly apologizing. Believe it or not, if you're someone who chronically apologizes, you have somebody in your life who's constantly apologizing, but then they make the same mistake all the time, this is someone with an ego, because you'd rather take the easy way out and apologize than fix your behavior. You keep apologizing for the same thing over and over again. Stop doing it. You don't need to apologize. The biggie, worrying about what everybody thinks about you. What do you mean? If I had a big ego, I wouldn't care what everybody thought. No, exactly the opposite. People with out of control egos are so insecure, they're constantly obsessed with what people think about them. People with no ego love themselves. People with the smallest ego are connected to God, and they love themselves because they know they come from God, in my opinion. You don't need the approval of other people because you've got God's approval. And once you have that, you don't need other people's approval. These are all ego issues that impact our lives. Wouldn't the ultimate version of you not brag, not tell stories about the past, not worry about what other people thought about you, take criticism very well? The ultimate version of you would have none of those things, wouldn't he or she? And that would be the removal of your ego.